FromSoft are infamous for their lore that's as deep and confusing as a joke I probably shouldn't make in the first 5 seconds of a video. And today we're going to be diving into the world of Elden Ring and ranking all the Remembrance bosses solely based on that lore. And since this video has absolutely nothing to do with gameplay, it means I don't have a valid excuse for just barely grazing by some boss I think is total shit, because I'm too stubborn to use anything but a faith build. Side note, if I sound a bit choked up at times, it's because I was. I got tired of waiting weeks for my cold to clear up and just started recording. So with that said, let's get ranking these Remembrance bosses. Godrick the Grafted's autobiography might as well be titled Diary of a Wimpy Kid, because this guy is easily the most pathetic thing to come out of Queen Marika's entire bloodline. And believe me, that's saying something. He got chased from his home in Lanedell disguised in women's clothes, and when he finally managed to scrounge up enough supporters to form a new kingdom in Limgrave, he instantly went mad with power, hacking off his peasants' limbs and grafting them onto his own body to turn himself into the ultimate handjob machine. It's a shame he couldn't graft himself a new personality, because this guy is fucking insufferable. He basically spends all of his time yammering about his genetic superiority and fondling his collection of dragon dildos. And as if rock bottom wasn't low enough for him, Malenia decided to pay his castle a visit on her way to Caelid and take a few of his limbs as souvenirs, literally forcing him to kiss her feet before she left. That being said, Godrick's lore is fucking hilarious, so I'm honestly comfortable giving our first entry here an S tier. Rennala was once a noble Carian queen and expert sorceress, dedicating her life to teaching others the wonders of magic. Then, the menopause hit her like a fucking truck. Her husband left her, took the kids, and now she's a mentally ill divorcee with too much time on her hands. Instead of picking up a normal hobby like knitting or some shit, she chose, much like an r/looks-maxing dweller, to get really into eugenics for some reason. She uses her rune of the Elden Ring to keep birthing these ugly little freaks. And when they inevitably turn out exactly how you'd expect a child missing half of its chromosomes to turn out, she splatters their brains against the wall and tries again. It's an endless cycle of derangement. Rennala's story is depressingly down to earth, minus the whole baby murdering, and she was, at the end of the day, manipulated by her husband and in turn Queen Marika. While she loved her family and people, she was seen by them as a means to an end. Abandoned and left to rot in an attic while her followers picked apart her kingdom like a flock of fucking pigeons. Overall, pretty good story but nothing spectacular, so I'll put it in the B tier. This walking mountain is not only peak character design but also peak lore. Radahn is basically the Satoru Gojo of Elden Ring. He's practically unbeatable on the field of battle and is so skilled in the use of gravity magic that you can tell the motherfucking stars themselves to sit their asses down. And did I mention that the reason he even began learning gravity magic in the first place was because he got 2 hench to ride his favourite horse Leonard. Yes, you heard that right, he called his horse fucking Leonard. Current Radahn is a bit past his prime to say the least. But bro used to be so terminally overpowered that they had to nerf him by giving him crippling chlamydia that rotted his legs off and frazzled his brain to a crisp. Now despite that, he's still an absolute unit, and canonically is only defeated when like 10 of the best warriors in the lands between gang up on his ass. I know that having a classic, the strongest type character can often lead to pretty bland lore, but in Radahn's case, there's a bit more to it. So I'm going to preemptively place this guy in the S tier, but don't worry because we'll come back to him later on in the video and tie up some loose ends, and that should hopefully justify this placement a little bit more. From everything we know, Astel and the several other versions of him littering the river wells basically crash-landed from outer space and almost immediately got to work pissing in the Nox's cereal. For what reason, we don't actually know, but what we do know is that he managed to destroy at least one of the Eternal Cities. Now, you would think a gravity magic wielding space worm that can literally level a fucking city would serve a bit more purpose in the game, but not really. This guy is all balls and no dick. His only job is to stand in the way and get flattened by the Tarnished as they're on their way to fuck Ranni. So it's gonna have to be a D tier for wasted potential. Right, moving on to Regal Ancestor Spirit. It's a big ass, old ass deer that eats other animals' souls to boost its own life force. If I had to imagine, he's basically the Michael Myers of the animal afterlife. It also seems to have played some importance in the culture of these shaman dudes. That being said, they kill their own kids and turn their skulls into flamethrowers, so I'm not exactly sure I want to know the role the soul-sucking deer monster played in that culture. So there's really not a lot of lore to go off of, although I'm gonna cheat and give it a bonus point because its theme fucking slaps. And even then, it's still only like a C tier at best. Elden Ring's Mr. Worldwide is the absolute GOAT, and I mean that in the literal sense. He's a goat man, and also a massive arsehole, and also a demigod. The funny part is that despite being cursed to look like every ugly bastard in hentai to the power of 2, he's still by far the most loyal to the Golden Order out of his siblings. Even though he was shunned by society for bearing a curse that he had no control over, he believes it's his grace-given duty to slay all the non-grace-given plebeians, even though he himself is non-grace-given, until he is grace-given. And if that whole segment confused the fuck out of you, then welcome to Morgott's psyche. It doesn't get better from here. I guess you can't expect much from a guy who was abandoned and left to rot in the sewers as a kid, but I would hope at the very least he'd understand who his real enemies are. His rampant inferiority complex and need for his even bigger of an arsehole mother's validation has left him fighting for scraps while the rest of his brothers and sisters have their eyes on the real prize. But the way Morgott sees it, they're the crazy ones, not him. Eventually, Morgott got exactly what he wanted. He rose up from the sewers and now rules Leyndell as its king, giving him the ability to cosplay Hitler on an even larger scale. Anyway, Morgott's story is pretty sad, but he's also kind of an idiot, and it makes it hard to sympathise with him, to be honest. I'll give him a solid A tier since he's an interesting and memeable character. Praetor Rykard is one of the 3 Carian siblings, though he abandoned Liurnia to go become the Golden Order's Grand Inquisitor, building Timu Fort Knox on the top of a volcano and having a grand old time terrorising the various minority groups of the lands between. Rykard was always a bit of a weakling, not as adept at sorcery as Ranni, nor as strong as Radahn, and after being absolutely ratioed by his siblings, chose to seek power in another way. And his grand plan? Lob himself into the mouth of a giant god serpent and hijack its brain. Living clung to the serpent's chin like a crusty parasitic neckbeard. This unholy fusion looks like a xenomorph trying to claw its way out of the token fat guy in the movie and speaks like he's been waterboarded with hot oil.
Together we will devour the very god.
It also essentially marks the end of Rykard's story, as since then he hasn't really been up to much. Fully embracing his new Discord mod lifestyle, he spends all day sleeping in his room and chowing down on human flesh flavoured Hot Pockets. And when we kill him, his wife starts slurping up the entrails of his decomposing corpse, yammering on about how one day he'll rise again like a dick with ED. Rykard's lore is fine. His motives are some of the weakest among the demigods, and make less and less sense the more you think about it. So I'd probably put him somewhere around the C tier. Anyway, Lich Dragon Fortisaxx is stuck up on the ass end of one of the most unintuitive areas of the game, down one of the most unintuitive hidden pathways in the game, and is part of one of the most unintuitive questlines in the game. That being said, it's kinda worth it, as Fortisaxx is a pretty sweet boss, at least in terms of his looks. Lore-wise, he's kind of a massive bitch. He was defeated by Godwyn the Golden, then became his best friend, then watched with what I can only assume was absolute horror as Godwyn proceeded to bang his sister and spawn one of the most cursed bloodlines to dwell in the lands between. Even till the very end, Fortisaxx held his tongue, and when Godwyn went and got himself stabbed, he tried to save him and ended up becoming infected with death. Just like actual death. Fast forward and he's clapped down in front of Godwyn's grave, protecting his gross flabby fish corpse. A true homeboy to the very end, but his lore isn't really anything special, so I'm gonna have to give it a C tier. The Fire Giant is one of the most sympathetic bosses in the game, even if that sympathy is somewhat lost on me under the feeling of wanting to bleach my eyes at the very fucking sight of him. I mean, I swear to God I've seen this exact guy crumpled up in an alleyway shooting up on some dubious substance. That's all besides the point though. The Fire Giant is the last of his kind, left to rot guarding a giant pot of fire at the top end of bumfuck nowhere, surrounded by fields upon fields of his dead friends and family. So one question remains, how did we get here? And the answer, as with most in Elden Ring, leads us right back to Marika. See, the Fire Giants worship an outer god of flame that just so happens to have its shrine dangerously close to the Erd Tree's kind of flammable looking branches. So naturally Marika ordered the extermination of all of the Fire Giants as a precaution. Don't worry though guys, she's just a girl. That'll surely clear her name, right? So yeah, that's essentially why the Fire Giant is up brooding on some hill amongst the corpses of his kin. During the fight, he also rips off his own leg and sacrifices it to become the avatar of his fell god. It's kinda cool, I guess, but it doesn't really save him from the D tier. Moving on to the Lands Between's dirtiest dun denizen, Mohg. Mohg spent the better part of 2 years being absolutely crucified by the community. Cause let's be honest, we all thought this guy was on the Epstein Island VIP list until the DLC came out and cleared the air. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Mohg is the twin brother of Morgott and also spent his childhood scrounging for shitty scraps in the sewers. Eventually he got tired of his socks being constantly covered in human fecal matter and set off for adventure. And by that I mean he went to go and live in a spiffed up hole in the ground and bathe in the blood of children. He sold his soul to an outer god called the Formless Mother, and now he can stick his hand up its ass and cover the arena in spicy blood. He founded a cult around himself and operates it like a dripped out Ponzi scheme, selling a better life in a new world if you follow his rigorous holy doctrine with more holes in it than Swiss fucking cheese. Pretty much exactly like a real cult operates. And following the logic of his real world counterparts, decided that incest and pedophilia sounded like a pretty neat combo. He kidnapped his younger half-brother with the intent of turning him into a god and marrying him, as one does. But this is a FromSoft game and it's never quite that simple. See, if Miquella was going to become a god, it sure as fuck wasn't going to be on Mohg's terms. And as it happens, the whole kidnapping fiasco was a result of Miquella's overpowered ass mind control and had nothing to do with Mohg's raving only hands addiction. Now Miquella is off looking for a husband for himself, although the first two choices fell through, so he's after the spare of the spare. Luckily, Mohg's body is basically fucking Play-Doh, so even though he looks ugly as fuck now, with a wee bit of plastic surgery he'll be looking like Henry Cavill in no time. Yet Mohg's tale is as tragic as it is hilarious. I'll give him bonus points for his drip and the fact that he was wrongfully dogged on for 2 entire years by the community. A tier. Should the Tarnished stumble their way down to this empty sand pit and decide to go for a nap, they might just find themselves waking up on the wrong side of the fucking century, and standing face to face with this thing. Placidusax, the original Lord of the Lands Between before the age of the Erdtree, a being so ancient, powerful and decrepit that he's forced to live outside the bounds of time just to merely survive. It can be assumed that he led the attack on Leyndell by the ancient dragons, although that's surprisingly not why he's missing some of his heads. That's thanks to Bayle the Dread, who's another dragon boss we'll come to later in the video. Placidusax's lore basically boils down to being an extremely old dragon who used to be someone important and now lives in a glorified iron lung to keep himself alive. It's a sad existence, and although he seems to be a fan favourite, I think his lore goes somewhere in the middle for me, right around the B tier. This man is in-fucking-sane. Malekith is one of the most badass characters in all of Elden Ring, with a cinema-worthy cutscene and so much edge you could use it for medical circumcision. Malekith is the half-brother slash shadow of Queen Marika, gifted to her by the Greater Will to act as a pawn to be thrown around as she saw fit, and also to act as a watchdog who would be there to tear her limb from limb if she ever fucked up. So either Malekith is painfully shit at his job, or fundamentally altering the laws of reality on a whim isn't really seen as a big deal, because she managed to pluck the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring, removing the very concept of death from the world. Store it inside Malekith's own hand and then have her kids come and steal a few slices of it for themselves, all without triggering his kill order. The consequences of this are that Malekith, Ranni and Rellana are the only ones who are able to permanently kill anyone in the Lands Between. Well, them and the army of murderous dumb fucks that they gave Shards of Death to. You might be able to increase the intelligence stat, but you can't increase common fucking sense. Which also means that every time Malekith kills you in-game, he's actually choosing to let you respawn because he sees you as that much of a non-threat. You're playing his game by his rules, which is such a sick piece of lore. Does it make sense in the context of the game? No, but I'll be honest, I couldn't really give a shit. Easy S tier from the furry. Malenia is probably one of the most iconic bosses in all of Elden Ring. She featured heavily in the trailer and has become something of a gaming icon. Why? Because she's absolutely fucking sick, that's why. Both in the metaphorical and the literal sense. She was born with pre-installed bacterial conjunctivitis, and her body is slowly eating itself from the inside out. Her eyes have crusted over, her limbs have rotted off, and the only thing keeping her from shriveling up like a putrid raisin is the unalloyed gold laced through her body, which stops the rot from spreading further. Her whole condition makes a bit more sense when you consider the fact that her parents are actually the same person, and decided to make the Habsburgs proud by engaging in the most reality-shattering levels of incest in fiction. So to be fair to Malenia, she's not doing half bad for someone with a single set of chromosomes. And even despite being legally blind and medically classed as a vegetable, she's managed to become the second strongest warrior in the Lands Between. Yes, I said second, fucking fight me. But all that pain she suffered didn't seem to give her any remorse when she chose to benevolently gift her stage 4 cancer to Caelid. Like, all of Caelid. All because her twin brother wanted to fuck Radahn. And when your continued existence is dangling in the grubby hands of Miquella, it's probably best to just do what he says. So in order to deliver the memo that Radahn doesn't exactly have bodily autonomy in this whole arrangement, she unleashes her final form on his ass. letting the full power of the scarlet rot within her bloom, turning Caelid into fantasy Chernobyl. Even after all that, she still didn't manage to kill Radahn, and the blooming took so much out of her that she had to be dragged back to the Halig tree and dumped in her granny chair to recover, making her claims of being quote-unquote undefeated the biggest lie in this video, second only to the notion that I have even the slightest clue as to what the fuck I'm talking about. Overall, Malenia is still an S tier for me though. She's still really fucking cool, even if she is a bit of a liar by calling herself undefeated. Godfrey is the first Elden Lord, which is basically just a nice way of saying he's Queen Marika's cumsock. But just because he gets brutally pegged by his wife doesn't make him a weakling by any means. No, he just likes it. In case you couldn't tell by looking at him, Godfrey wasn't exactly chosen to be Elden Lord because of his immense brain power. He came from a time before the Golden Order reigned supreme, and was used by Marika as a walking nuclear bomb to airdrop on the doorstep of her enemies and show them why the Greater Will promoted her to manager and not them. And Godfrey, he was damn good at his job. I mean, just fucking look at him. Dude's built like an 18-wheeler truck and he ain't skipping leg day to get there. Every step this dude takes shows up on the fucking Richter scale, and what's more, the lion strapped to his back isn't just a shitty cosplay prop. Sorosh here is actually suppressing Godfrey's bloodlust, and the only thing stopping him from grinding the entirety of Leyndell into a fine gold-flecked paste. Godfrey is a man of one plan, and that plan is to become a natural disaster given human form, and it's hard not to love him for that. Though for me, there's one dark smear on his resume that keeps him from S tier. So after being binned off by Marika in favour of Radagon, Godfrey never really moved on, and after Marika fucked the world sideways and called him back to come and fix it, he came running like a fucking dog. Which, I'll be honest, is kind of a massive aura loss. That being said, he's well cool enough to get into the A tier for me. The King Consort and second Elden Lord, but a few of the monikers given to the walking dildo with a man attached known as Radagon. So Radagon is a champion of the Golden Order and was the husband of the previously mentioned Rennala, who he married in order to strengthen relations between them and the Carians. Just like Godfrey though, as soon as Queen Marika called, he'd packed his things, signed the divorce papers, and was already in Leyndell by the time she'd finished asking if he wanted to be her consort. And so the second Elden Lord was crowned. Radagon didn't just become Elden Lord though. No, it seems Marika went so deep inside him during the pegging session that they literally merged into one being. Now, here's where it gets a tad confusing, because we have absolutely zero clue whether or not Marika and Radagon merged together in some sort of fucked up show of affection, or if Radagon was actually split off from Marika ages ago and this was them combining to become whole again. And the thing is, there's evidence to support both arguments. Probably the most convincing is the fact that we've actively seen this exact thing happen again with Miquella, who sheds Saint Trina from his own body in order to attain godhood. Unlike Marika, who used Radagon to her advantage, Miquella dumps Saint Trina in the bin behind a McDonald's and forgets she exists. But the principle is there, so I'm personally in the camp of Radagon simply being a part of Marika from the start. But how did they manage to have kids out here, you ask? Fuck you, that's how. Anyway, moving on, we kick Radagon's ass back to the fucking Crucible, and just when you start thinking to yourself that seemed really easy for a final boss, this fat-ass fucking space worm pops out the ground and mulches Radagon's corpse into a sword. So, the Elden Beast here is something in between a living being and a concept of the world. Some real deep stuff we've got here. He was sent down to act as the Greater Will's vassal, and a symbol of perfect order, literally turning himself into the Elden Ring to alter the laws of reality. So when the phrase "God slain" pops up after kicking its non-existent cunt in, it's not lying. This thing is literally the closest you can get to a real god existing in the physical plane. So I know I've had to spend a lot of time actually explaining the lore in this video that's supposed to be about the lore, but there was a lot to get through with this guy, and I think just by proxy Radagon and the Elden Beast belong in S tier, since they play such a pivotal role in the game's story and world building. Anyway, now we're finally moving on to the DLC bosses. The Divine Dancing Lion is Shadow of the Erdtree's first great test of strength, but it's also pretty confusing when you watch its cutscene for the first time. We have the disembodied voice of some old woman calling out Queen Marika as this pile of crumpled corpses cosplaying as a lion springs to life in front of us. The cutscene rambles a bit and then ends with the line, "Cleanse away the strumpet's vile progeny," which basically translates to, "Queen Marika's a hoe, go kill her firstborn son." And that realistically is the lore for this guy. It's some kind of spirit that inhabits the bodies of these lion dancer dudes and puppets them as one entity, with the purpose of fighting back against Messmer's crusade. They can also use like 3 different elements, which is pretty sick, I can't lie. Originally I was going to rate this guy pretty low, but thinking about it some more I actually really dig it, so I'm going to put him in the A tier. You might be pretty surprised to find out that Elden Ring's most dastardly predator is actually a predator, and Rellana isn't exactly subtle when it comes to her unconventional leanings when it comes to deciding who to riz up. She prowls the Shadowlands with a total lack of shame and a list of allegations so devious I wouldn't be surprised if she shows up on the Epstein files. Once upon a time she was a princess of Caria, and when Radagon came along to wipe up her twin sister Rennala, she took one look at the underage son he brought with him and immediately fell head over heels. So when Messmer was banished to the Shadowlands where that pesky age of consent thing didn't exist, Rellana saw her golden opportunity to pounce and ran off to follow him, taking a bunch of the Carian royal army with her, and now chases him around on his crusade vying desperately for his attention. For Messmer though, the allure of a goth baddie matters not, for his purpose standeth unchanged. And now Rellana essentially serves as a glorified bouncer on your way to Shadow Altus. Thankfully, all the playgrounds in the area have already been reduced to cinders, because if they hadn't, I doubt anyone would manage to keep her minding the door for all that long. Rellana's lore is fairly basic, but it's also pretty funny, so I'll slap her in the B tier. The Putrescent Knight is essentially a living amalgamation of corpse fluid that pooled at the bottom of the stone coffin fissure. More specifically, the corpse fluid, called putrescence, only leaks out of people who lived impure lives, whatever the hell that means. Imagine it like a mosh pit of thousands of souls stuck together in purgatory, except purgatory is actually just a giant dude riding a horse. It makes sense then that when St. Trina set up her Fent lab at the bottom of the fissure, this guy became her #1 customer, sucking up that sweet, sweet nectar that clears his mind of all the, eternal suffering. Anyway, dude's so damn addicted to the stuff that he'll attack anyone who tries to get anywhere near his dealer, because God forbid someone else get to join in on the fun. Well, fuck. Anyway, this guy goes in the C tier. Moving on. Once upon a time, Commander Gaius trained under the same Alabaster Lord as Radahn. He treated him as a younger brother and was good friends with Messmer, and the three form a kind of triangle of knowing each other in the story. But I guess in order to distract you from the fact that he's the weakest link lore-wise, FromSoft decided to give him a charge with a dodge window in the decimal places of a fucking frame. Fun fact, he's also an Albinauric, which, fun fact, means his legs are tiny and shriveled and don't work anymore. And fun fact, he had a pair of leg greaves made anyway that he just keeps around to, imagine what it would have been like to wear them. Anyway, this guy went to go crusading in the Shadowlands with Messmer, serving as his right-hand man and leading his men into battle. To be honest, Gaius doesn't actually have that much lore for how important he's supposed to be in the story, so I'm going to put him in the C tier, and it's only because he's linked to two of the demigods in a somewhat meaningful way. This next one is as the Erdtree Avatar is to the Erdtree, but unlike that fat fuck, the Scadutree Avatar is just a depressed sunflower. He's a living embodiment of the tree itself, manifesting to defend its roots, but by the looks of it, dude is definitely on his last legs. Laying in a puddle of shiny jizz at the bottom of the shadow tree, this guy is very likely to be the last of his kind. Yeah, you unlike half the bosses on the list. So I wish Tall, Dark and Gloomy over here would stop making it my fucking problem. Anyway, I'm not going to put any more effort into talking about this guy's lore than FromSoft put into making it. I love his design, but the lore really is just a nothing burger, and the lower tiers are looking kinda empty, so it's going to have to be a D tier. Messmer the Impaler might be one of the most tragic bosses in the entire Soulsborne franchise. A child who wanted nothing more than to do right by his mother and create a better world, and abandoned to the annals of history when he no longer fit into that world. See, Messmer, like pretty much every last one of his siblings, was born cursed. But unlike the others whose curses only really affected themselves, Messmer's flame had the power to burn down the Erdtree. And in order to stop that happening, Queen Marika ripped out his eye and replaced it with a seal of pure grace, which helped him control the flames within him. Of all the children that Marika fucked over, Messmer is probably one of the more understandable ones as to why she did it. Having your entire world order revolve around a flammable hunk of wood, and then having a walking matchstick just chilling out right at its base is probably not the best idea. What isn't understandable is the crypto rug pool level scheme she concocted to deal with it. I'm guessing she took a second look at the shit she pulled with Godfrey and then a big ol' light bulb appeared over her head, because Messmer was eventually sent off on a crusade to the Shadowlands for the purposes of exterminating this one group of people that Marika really didn't like. To be fair, they kinda deserved it. She then spun a story back home about how Messmer was off committing a brutal racial genocide and then banished him from ever coming back, eventually letting the knowledge of his very existence fade away with time. Don't feel too bad for him yet though, as all that misfortune doesn't stop this guy from being a massive asshole. He absolutely agrees with what he's doing in the Shadowlands, and he doesn't exactly try to give these people a swift death by any means. He's not called Messmer the fucking Impaler for nothing. Nor does he extend any courtesy to you as a fellow victim of Marika's psychopathy. He wants your graceless ass just as dead as the Hornsent, and he'll stop at nothing to make sure that happens. One misstep and you're getting a spear shoved so far up your ass it's tickling yesterday's lunch. There's a few extra bits and bobs to Messmer's lore, most of which I've already mentioned in the video, so I'll just leave it at that. Messmer is definitely one of the most characterized demigods in the game, so for me it's an instant and easy S tier. Romina, Saint of the Bud, is essentially what Malenia could have been if she'd woken up on the wrong side of the bed one too many times, and she's what happens when you don't refuse the God of Rot's offer to become the Pope of STDs. When Messmer and his crusade came rolling into the Land of Shadow, Romina's peaceful little life was thrown into disarray, and her friends were thrown ass first onto pointy metal sticks. When that happened, she turned to the God of Rot, and allowed herself to be infected and become its version of Jesus. Somewhere along the way I guess she forgot Scarlet Rot was weak to fire, and that probably explains why she's still holed up in her church cowering like a bitch. Use that lapse in judgment to distract yourself from the fact that Romina is strangely attractive despite looking like a bug and a dragon fruit had a baby, and she's solid enough. So I'll slap her in the C tier. Metyr enjoyers, all 4 of you that is, brace yourselves, because I am unreasonably biased against this boss. So, from what little research I could bring myself to do about this thing, she seems to be the daughter of the Greater Will, and much like the Elden Beast was basically sent down to act as a living servant of it. She birthed the things that supposedly communicate the Greater Will's wishes unto the lands between. But the problem with that is that the Greater Will hasn't been around for a long ass time. Nope, he dumped his creations on the lands between and then went the way of the absentee father, leaving them to their own devices. What this means is that all this time, Metyr has been the one controlling the 2 fingers and guiding the fate of the world. Now that is a fucking horrifying thought. There aren't many bosses in this game whose lore makes me actively enjoy them less, but this is one of them. The fact that this creature of absolute fucking nightmare is the only thing controlling the whole story of the game, it makes me want to fucking vomit. D tier. While he may look more like a pruned sack of loose bones now, this old fart was once an aspiring lord of frenzied flame. What the hell is that? It's essentially the Elden Lord if they had an outer god of chaos flame inside of them, with the power to, say it with me now,
Burn the Erd Tree to the ground.
In case you haven't figured out by the 3rd time I've had to mention that in this video alone, it's kind of a running theme. But unlike the other types of fire we've mentioned, this one is actually bad for everyone involved. This fire isn't just about burning the world into a new age, its only purpose is to kill everyone. Like straight up just kill everyone and everything. Now if the fact that the average Elden Lord is built like a fucking tank, and this guy is, well, not, didn't clue you in, he failed quite miserably. And after his neighbours found out about his dubious dealings, they were rightfully a little pissed, and decided to punish him by skewering him with the legendary sword of chronic back pain. Now Elden Ring's Master Roshi could have removed the sword at any time, if it weren't for the allure of one Rennala, the young woman sacrificed by the Hornsent to serve as something in between a sugar baby and a caretaker for him. And while I'm sure Midra was absolutely loving this arrangement, that didn't stop the immense and constant pain coursing through his body. The only thing stopping him from ripping that sword out and going sicko mode on the bastards that speared him in the first place was one lone word from Rennala: endure. And so he did. For years, until Rennala dies of old age, the world forgets he ever existed, and the Tarnished busts down the door of his mansion and clubs him over the head. Apparently a failed Lord of Frenzied Flame is still pretty fucking strong, even if his body looks like a decrepit pile of loose tendons and broken dreams. The fact that this guy's lore goes deeper than most of the mandatory bosses in the DLC is kinda insane to be honest, and I think it's pretty damn good, so I'm gonna slap it in the A tier. Bayle the motherfucking Dread takes the word badass, eats it, shits it out, and then shoves it down your throat as he glasses the arena in a storm of piss-yellow lightning. Now during Bayle's fight you might notice a few minor scars on his body, and those were thanks to our main man Placidusax. See, Bayle coveted the position of Big Daddy of Dragons, and challenged Placidusax to the position. Now Bayle's missing an arm and a leg, but he also managed to rip 2 of Placidusax's heads off during the fight. Not sure exactly how that translated to a loss for Bayle, but either way he's the one who got chased away from the lands between and stuck up a mountain to maul over it. He's also a massive hoe, as he's the ancestor of all of the lesser dragons we see in the game. I'm not entirely sure if he had all of these kids before being chased away or if he just started getting it on out of boredom while kicking about the Jagged Peak. Speaking of peak, that's not really what his lore is. It's pretty middle of the road, so I'm going to put him right there in the B tier.
My loyal blade and champion of the festival. Both your deeds will ever be praised in song. Now, the vow will be honored, and my lord brother's soul will return, so that he may be my consort.
Last on this list, we come to promised Consort Radahn. Now, this boss is pretty divisive, with a large section of the community thinking it should have been Godwyn as Miquella's consort instead. I'm personally in the camp of I don't give a fuck, because it's not really in my prerogative to give a rat's ass about which gay incestuous marriage is the correct one in this scenario. Though what I will say is that I would have been way more pissed if we never got to fight Prime Radahn than I am that we never got to fight Godwyn. So we've chased Miquella all the way through the 7 circles of hell, aka this one section of Ballarat, and finally arrive at the very place where Queen Marika the Eternal ascended to godhood. Only to be met with none other than motherfucking Starscourge Radahn aura farming his balls off to the backing of Miquella's disembodied voice. It's quite the reveal to meet a boss we've already killed like 100 hours of playtime ago, but once again it's prime fucking Radahn, so you know you're in for one hell of a battle. You steel your nerves, ready your buffs, and step forward with gravely misplaced confidence. Because Radahn sure as fuck sees that mimic tier in your hotbar and thundercunts himself across the arena to make sure you can't summon that shit without eating a face full of gravel first. Now, despite all the hyping up I just did, his first phase is actually piss easy. It's the second half of the fight where things start to get interesting. Miquella the Kind emerges from the gates of whatever circle of hell he came from and joins the fight. And by that I mean he clings to Radahn's back and fires spells at us like a pussy. Miquella uses the power of friendship and incest to become one of the most rage-inducing bosses in all of Soulsborne. Even despite having just ascended to literal godhood, he still isn't capable of killing some nameless nobody without the help of his consort. And upon his defeat we get access to the endgame cutscene. Now, I've already mentioned a fair bit of Miquella's lore in the video already, so I'll briefly summarise it here and add in a few extra details. So, Miquella was born cursed, both with eternal youth and also the inability to complete literally anything he starts. Like that book you're writing stays in a perpetual state of unfinishedness, except it applies to literally everything he does. His eternal youth is also technically a consequence of that and not a separate curse. Now, despite this, his goals remain lofty. Step 1, become God. Step 2, rule the world. And so that's where his promised consort comes in, because if you can't do something yourself, then you might as well get someone else to do it for you. He asked, quote-unquote, Radahn to be his consort. After Radahn refused, he had him executed, and then had Mohg incubate his corpse into adulthood. After the two come to perish at the hands of the Tarnished, he plucked Radahn's soul, placed it in Mohg's body, and now he has his Elden Lord. Mission accomplished. He also shed his mortal flesh, which if I'm not mistaken also got rid of his curse, meaning he might actually be somewhat of a threat to the world now. Not ideally, but also completely in character for Miquella, he left the guy who's quite actively going around and hunting all the demigods very much alive, and that's how his fate is sealed. I think this boss ties in wonderfully to the lore, and it's also been set up since the very first cinematic trailer, solving the mystery of what Malenia whispered to Radahn. So I'm quite happy putting it in the S tier. So here we are guys, the final rankings. If you haven't already, be sure to comment your favourites down below. This video took a lot longer than I thought it would to make, so if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a wee thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. And if you want to watch something similar to this, I've got a ranking of all of the areas in the game by how livable they are. I'll leave a link to that in the top right and in the description. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.